think you don't need any more time for them to switch on cameras?
Let me just check, ma'am, once more.
I think that should be the first first announcement to switch on. Keep the mics off, but cameras on, because then the becomes interaction, becomes conversation, becomes meaningful.
Absolutely,
otherwise speaking to only names, all black screens.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Sometimes bandwidth issues are there. Some students who haven't switched on, they're switching on. Students, please make sure that you switch on your cameras.
Otherwise, they would probably just showing that they're there, but they're not listening. They're not there.
I don't think, ma'am, in your session, people are so excited, including ourselves, that they can actually miss it out. That's not possible. Students, once again, yeah, I think, ma'am, most of them have switched on.
Okay, good. You can proceed now as you wish.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Students?
Yes, thank you very much, sir, and thank you very much, ma'am. We'll be proceeding now. So, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to the third edition of the flagship event of IIM Jammu, the Leadership Summit. Empowering women is a matter of envisioning and realizing a brighter, gender-equal future. Women's equal participation in the workforce is not only a demand for justice or democracy, but can also be seen as a necessary condition for women's interests to be taken into account. And the gap can be bridged through progressive policy making and by leveraging technology to foster an equitable and diverse environment at the workplace. Our prominent female speakers today, through the topic Envision, Empower and Exceed, will shine light upon the scope and potential of such initiatives as well as various challenges encountered.
IIM Jammu is delighted to welcome Dr. Kiran Bedi, a vigorous personality who is an inspiration to all of us. She is the first woman to become an IPS officer in our country, marking the beginning of an era. Ma'am has been the governor of Puducherry and also served at the United Nations as the civilian police advisor in peacekeeping operations. Awarded the Magsaysay Award, Dr. Bedi is the founder of Navjyoti and India Vision Foundation, organizations that are devoted to serving the underprivileged in rural areas, urban areas, and in jails. She has authored several books, the latest of which is Fearless Governance. This book is based on the ground realities of nearly 5 years of service of Dr. Bedi as Lieutenant Governor of Puducherry and her vast experience of 40 years in the Indian Police Service. Indian Institute of Management Jammu welcomed you to the Leadership Summit 3.0. Since ma'am is from public service background with 35 to 40 years of experience in administration, we would really like to hear from you about leadership in public services. Like, what are the unique leadership practices you followed which helped you throughout the journey? The virtual stage is all yours, ma'am.
Very good. Thank you so much. Let me begin by saying how impressed I am. I've been with you since 10 a.m. and I've just loved listening to the speakers who preceded me. And you are very, very privileged that you heard all of them. I want to thank your director, Professor B.S. Sahai, for envisioning this and making it happen. I want to thank Dr. Mukbil Burhan, who's been in contact and inspirer behind my joining also as well as a great team. Dr. Prateek Jain, also you're the chairperson of the Center for Entrepreneurship, Innovations and Skill Equipment. I want to also recognize, I just enjoyed Mr. Gopalakrishnan, listening to him, Mr. Rohit Kansal. I loved the brilliant, very bright officer. I'd like to have a copy of his, if you are going to make a copy of his speech. It was very good. I'm very proud of the fact that he did so well as a Secretary of Higher Education. And then I also heard Mr. Anil Kaul. So I've been with you and I've enjoyed the summit. It's not dragged. It's been very, very to the point. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. It's not often that one gets this kind of luxury of time to listen, but today I did have the time. I found the time to be. So I have learned more than I am going to speak more. So since I've been so many hours with you. You asked me straight away a pointed question. And then, of course, we leave some time for Q&A. It's now by my clock 2:25. I must finish by 3:15 as I see. Mr. JB Singh is to follow me. So I'll speak till 3 and we leave 15 minutes for more Q&A from the cameras which may be on. Not from the cameras, not from only the names, but the cameras which are on. So great, looking forward to. You asked me a very nice pointed question. What were my unique leadership qualities which I practiced to survive? Believe me, to survive. For a public servant, the survival to my mind is not to stay in service, but to accomplish what one has to do despite many odds. In public service, there are colleagues and peers. There are no mentors. Believe me, in public service, in government service, there are no mentors, surprisingly. Once in a while, you do get very good mentors when you are under training as probationers who do handhold you. The reason is that we don't have mentors because nobody has time in public service to mentor you. They're also stressed out. They're so hard pressed, and those who ought to be mentoring are very hard pressed for time. They are very occupied, or they appear to be very busy. I do not know, or they feel they don't have the time for it. So we all survive despite no mentorship. I would only say exceptions, of course, are the rule without me generalizing. So when I said survived, is because by and large, we are all left on our own to the whirlwinds and the challenges, the hurricanes and the storms and the changes, the disasters, which keep coming our way in the government, as you know, and we deal with them mentally and physically. So let me share with you, when I became the first woman of the Indian Police Service, I had no colleague. I had only male colleagues, but they were fine. I don't mind having only male colleagues, but there was a natural distance. There was a natural space. I was not known to them. I didn't know them. And they took time to be friends, but then we all compete for our seniorities, for meritorious service medals, for our positions, postings, transfers. There's just too much of competition internally. Seniority is a major issue. Hierarchy is a major. You see, this is not the way it is as much. There are some spillovers even in the private sector of what I've just said, but it is very, very prominent in the public sector. Issues of particularly hierarchy. And so let me share with you quickly the points I've listed out to address your question. Is that what are the unique leadership practices? So I'm looking at the unique ones which I've culled out for myself, digging into my years of experience, and I'll illustrate some for you as I explain. Number one, my first unique leadership which I felt, compared to many others which they did not practice. Some did, but few did only what I am going to share with you as a whole, as a package. Whatever I'm going to share with you, I've addressed it as a package. But I also wish to share with you that the points which I'm going to give you will help you through whether you join the UPSC at some stage. I know many management students do. They aspire to do, or they join public sector, or they are into the corporate world. But I can share with you that that's what Indira Nooyi said when she released my book, Fearless Governance, that she said it's a blueprint for good governance. And the leadership practices which have been listed in this book cut across private and public sector barriers. So they are leadership qualities which will be equally relevant for you. So if you could make a note, all you just do have is customize it the way you want. My first of all is, I have seen and what worked for me Secondly, you practice openness. You're not just saying that you're very versatile, you're accessible. You are practicing accessibility. You're practicing openness. You're practicing listening. You are practicing research. You're practicing probe. You're practicing. That means you are knowing now a little more somewhere because you're accessible. You are practicing accessibility. Always listen. You're practicing first openness before you're practicing listening. So therefore, you second practices research and stakeholders. But in your case, there'll be stakeholders. There may be you'll be walking the market and you're in marketing. Stop by a shop. Ask customer, client, shopkeeper, how's your product doing? Why is it always listen? You're doing well. First, before you ask, be a consumer, be a buyer. So you will get to know what's happening. So listen, see, feel, study, examine, videograph, whatever you want to do. Customer, client. Now you come back to the office. How's your product done? Now you use first time. You're now not telling what's wrong. Be a consumer, be a buyer. Third, you will get to know what is explain, listen, communicate, see, feel, timeline. Examine, document, follow up, customer one-on-one. Now, automatically, this is leading to communication. It's leading to timelines. Supposing I have seen a particular pothole, or I've seen a broken down communication, and I've seen timeline in the morning. Document. What would I do? Follow up. Automatic, and of course, I will call my colleagues. I'm going there. Sometimes you can keep a surprise, and sometimes I have seen and fall in a particular year with a wireless or messaging broken. I'm here, come and join me. Everybody sees together. And they are ashamed. This is naming and shaming. You don't have to say anything. The problem is sometimes and you can then ask, I'm here with wireless, why has it been left like that? Where is the junior engineer who was supposed to have seen it himself? Why has he left a pothole? They are ashamed. Why? Who was supposed to have patrolled at night to see this thing? All this stuff, so it's communication and it's a timeline, okay? By when will it be over? Because you've seen it. Where is the junior? Ask the junior engineer who supposed कब तक भर जाएगा? Why has रात तक भर जाएगा? शाम तक set a timeline. There's no paper at night. No paper. All this you're achieving everything. Communication, document, and it's a timeline. Okay? Document by when click you over keep it. Because you've seen man is really ask the junior engineer place to run. Because he's documented. If you want to save it in his folder, you can save it. That's performance. No paper at night. So and there's a follow-up. You already done follow-up. Communication, document, and it's a timeline. शाम तक follow-up. मुझे picture भेजना. So I used to say, all right, जब भर जाएगा ना, please send me a photograph on my document. You have done it in his folder by just saying morning performance, morning visit. So and there's a follow-up. You already done timeline. It's documented. It's follow-up, and it's also made you to interact. So I used to say how these three things are solidly interactive. This is the way I undertake, and it really works like magic. Paperless work, but I achieved it all in that one morning start, or even during the day if I wanted to visit. Now the fourth thing, the fourth practice which I did involved social audit. Bring social audits, because sometimes we think we are the only audit. You can have stakeholders. I, for instance, they were somebody to visit. It's a market. It's a market. Supposing we practice which I put up a police post. So how does the police post perform? How do I know? Because sometimes हम बहुत अच्छा काम करते हैं, जो आता है बड़ी चीजें मिलते हैं, इतने बजे से बजे हम यही रहते हैं जरी. I ask the nearby, it's a market association, can you please tell me how they do it? So I'm getting my social audit. How do I know? You are saying you're very अच्छा काम करते हैं, जो आता है बड़ी चीजें मिलते हैं, I have a social audit. So the police, so you create systems of social audit. I created it from my police. Can you please, or administration police, let's say for an irrigation. So I have the PWD working. I involve you are saying you're very better. I involve the self-help. I involve the nearby neighbors. You watch whether the work is being properly done or not. So involve for a review, social audit. By the PWD, I know your office. I know your office. I know your people you work. Now it doesn't matter what rank they are. Know them. because they are your real tools, they are your real work. So know your officers how? You know them by spot, but you can also do one your officers. There's a whole chapter of know your officers. Know your people you work with. It doesn't matter what rank they are. Know them because they are your real tools. Do look at it. By the way, this book is downloadable with compliments from my website. But you can also do one. You go to kiranbedi.com. There's a whole chapter and go to Fearless Governance. It says you can download the book. I have written the book to be read, not to be sold. I have donated all royalties already. By the way, my objective was to share my life experiences that doesn't remain restricted within me. So you can download the book, read the chapter 101. It's got pictures, it's got QR code. I have go to each chapter with a QR code. If you click on the QR code, you can read more. You can see snippets of the chapter, photographs of that chapter, color. So you read chapter 1. Please find time to read the one-on-one. It's got QR code. I used to have a time that a particular hour of the day where I used to turn by turn and see all the officers. Earlier there were photographs in person, color. Then we started to do one-on-ones on the web. But connecting with the people, which means if suppose I'm calling a person Ajay Singh, and I say Singh sahab, kaise ho raha Singh sahab? Turn by turn, I'll say Ajay, kaise ho raha? In person, kaise ho raha? So when I call it by Ajay, first name, on the way I get close. When I say Singh, it's different, which means it's like Kiran Bedi. Bedi kaise ho raha Singh? But if somebody calls me Kiran, I'd rather say Bedi kya ho raha? Bedi, I don't like it. Ajay, kaise ho raha? I don't like it. I like my first name. So when I call my senior calls me by my first name, I like close. Similarly, if I call my junior by his first name, it's like Kiran, we like it. It's a warm thing. But if somebody calls me Kiran, your predecessing speakers talked a lot about empathy. Talked a lot about communication. All your speakers talked about high percentage in one of your higher education. I call my research is saying emotional skills, soft skills, which is all your they will do better. Technical and soft skills is the answer to the future work. And this is emotional skills, where I connect with the person. I listen. Technical and soft hearing is the answer to the future work. And तुम्हारी फैमिली कैसे है कोई कहेगा मेरा माय चाइल्ड मैम आई हैव डिसेबिलिटी चाइल्ड एंड आई एम पोस्टेड ऑन माय वाइफ इज elsewhere I listen to find out can I be of any help if I'm demanding work out of her should I be not listening to it and finding out if I तुम्हारी फैमिली कैसे है कोई कहेगा मेरा माय चाइल्ड मैम आई हैव डिसेबिलिटी this person is and I posted on my knowing your officers is another quality which is the fifth point I've shared demanding work five I've shown you I've combined morning rounds with morning nutrition together so therefore this is my fifth point my point number 6 knowing your is constantly upskill for solution you are a leader when you go on the ground when you do 101 when you do your presentation with the boss you are always looking for what can I do at number 6 knowing you are actually looking for ideas and how do you practice them or how do you ideate more how do you find a solution or a problem is thrown to you how do you find a solution you are always looking for what's the mind job so you are constantly looking for ideas that's when or how do you ideate more? Mr. Krishna Balakrishnan talked about or 20 days in a year they are putting aside for training. This doesn't matter to public service at all. You are constantly this is required where you are dedicating a month. In fact, we have training reserves in manpower, but many times the seniors don't allow the juniors to go for any training because they feel the president is more important than they need. So many people lose out on any upskilling in public service, but many times if you do this morning rounds, the juniors, if you are on the job or for any, if you're listening to people, if you're doing 101s, you will know many people lose out on any upskill. That means you are constantly upskilling. You know, you do this morning rounds, you are actually individualized. You're listening to people. If you're doing 101s, sometimes you do group training. Sometimes we need to do individualized. That means you are constantly. You call it mentoring. I think it's an institutional need, individual need. It's an individual need because sometimes you can bunch them, sometimes you cannot bunch them. Somebody is in the primary level and somebody you call it mid level, somebody is in the higher levels, but you all bunch them. When we bunch them, it doesn't really it helps, but it doesn't always. But if you individualize it with 101, somebody then find a specific course. Sometimes you go individually say you go for this training, or you go for this one, or you do this online program. Then I will sponsor you. The government will sponsor you. See how you're doing? You're individually strengthening the empowerment of the person. Upskilling solutions. With solutions, you are all and you don't need to minute that effort. When you're doing 101, read that chapter carefully when I describe what is 101. You will see, don't minute it. He should not feel threatened that somebody is recording me. No recording. It's all mental record. There's a trust establishment. It's a trusting relationship you must establish, that I trust you. I don't need to mentally record. मैं देखूंगा अब महीने के बाद तुझे पूछूंगा तूने ये कहा था. No. When you start meeting people like this on a regular basis, you don't forget. And you know what? When he or she comes back to you, they come back with a smile because they are fulfilling your trust. Many women, as Lieutenant Governor, when I was doing 101s with many directors who were women, and when they met me on 101, do you know what they said? Ma'am, I wish such 101s had been all through our career and we had started with our career, because nobody was meeting anybody. In public service, you are not mandated to meet anybody. These are your own individual practices. These are your individual choices. This could be your corporate culture. This could be a business practice. But in the startups, you are the one who is setting up your own cultures. You are setting up your own practices. So it's up to you, friends. It's upskilling for solutions and through 101s, knowing your officers, and up for an upskilling in solutions. Seventh, my next point is work on convergence and collaborations. What has COVID done? One of your speakers said, COVID broke silos. It brought in more harmony and unity. Today, technology is helping us to collaborate more, to converge more. I think silo time is all off. Even in startups, if you've got friends and you can work with each other, would make you grow faster. So if you can look at collaborations and convergences, would be mud. Like, for instance, I give you an example how I did it. As Lieutenant Governor of Puducherry, there was a declining water table in Puducherry, declining water table. And everybody was left to themselves. Every village, everybody is to how do you water harvest? And irrigation canals were full of silt. And every time there was a good rain, the irrigation canal or the pond or the tank or the wall was full of silt. So nothing would percolate, all would overflow. And in the overflow, there was a flood in the villages. See, flooding happened instead of water seeping in because everybody was looking at themselves. Every village was by itself. What I did was, that's another chapter in the book called Water Rich Puducherry. If you read that, you will find a solution in corporate social responsibility, how you can all work together. What I did was I formed a coalition and a consortium of those companies, pharmaceuticals, MRFs, Whirlpools, Lucas, Inox, who were all using a lot of water, groundwater, to deal with their product. I brought a group of them and said, look, you all adopt irrigation canals from where you are nearby drawing water. You hire a contractor, you hire the machine, the earth mower, you adopt this irrigation canal, you clean it up so that the water comes here, which you are drawing out of all. Then the rainwater goes into the irrigation canal, into the tanks, etc. You'll be very happy to know, by evidence and proof, when I left Pondicherry, I left the Puducherry Union Territory 7 meters high. It was 3 meters, it was declining by 2 to 3 meters when it was measured later after 2 years of solid work of corporate social responsibility, collation and collaboration. Now this is collaboration with government, because now they were partnering with my PWD, but we were spending no money. Government of Puducherry had no money. So, but what do we do? Do we leave the people high and dry? No. I think this is one of the things which Indira Nui did also as the CEO of PepsiCo, where she found the performance with purpose concept. When she said, and that's how she also got engaged, her company got engaged in water harvesting issues. So friends, convergence and collaboration, wherever you come, private or with government, how you do it, you can find your solution. And I did this, I've given you an example. 8th, raise, I've already said raise, support and conserve. This was my 8th point, which I've merged with, explained to you with convergence and collaboration. 9th, envision ahead. And vision ahead means when you are in the field, you will start looking at the vision ahead. You will start looking what is the long-term solution. You will come back and on the desk and you start planning ahead, which means you will start developing from an idea to the problem, to the possible solution, to the short-term, to long-term, to vision ahead. Visions ahead are not done in isolation. Visions ahead are done when you see, when you feel, when you touch, when you hear, that's when you use all your five senses on the ground. That's my first point is very good. Start your day in the field. Do not ruin your very morning creative hour, straight away going to the field and start getting involved. No, start your day early and go into the field and then go to the office. But you are available in the field. So envision ahead. 10th is, my point is empowerment. What are you doing all this for? All this for is for empowering people. You're empowering your rank and file. You're empowering your organization. You're empowering your consumer. You're empowering your people who you're working for. It depends on who you serve. Look, I was serving. You are earning. You serve, I serve, you earn. When you're in the private sector, you serve and you earn. I served and I earned my salary. You serve and you earn for your shareholder, and you earn goodwill, you earn reputations. In my case, I served, I earned my salary, which I would have got anyway, even if I hadn't, even if I had not gone on the ground, even if I had not brought the donors together, I would have got my salary. That's the joy and security of being in public service. You don't perform, you still get your salary. You don't do these, you still get your salary. On the contrary, when you do these, sometimes you break vested interest, as I did. There's a whole chapter in the book called How Did I Deal with the Hostile Chief Minister? How did I deal with hostile politicians? How did I deal with hostile corrupt officers? How I had to remove a chief secretary. I got him removed because he was not honest in his work. I had to get him out of the system because he was not cooperating and not being part of the change. So despite that, how this is very, very vital, that how do you deal with it? So in fact, in our government service, low performance is a surest way of security and survival. But performance is challenging the status quo all the time. Whereas changing the status quo for you is profit. For me, change as public servant, changing the status quo is a threat. But the question is, what are you there for? Finally, it comes to the end of the purpose of your work. So for me, the purpose was service to the community, integrity. And in fact, I will stop this answer with a few minutes now to go, is I gave a concept of T to everybody. T means trust, empowerment, and alignment. The T mantra was, when I took the oath as Lieutenant Governor, the T mantra I gave in the opening statement to everybody was trust. I shall remain, look up to that. I will trust you, you trust me. We begin with the relationship of trust. I empower you, you empower yourself by following the law and by also feeling that we are all here for you. Feel empowered. You feel empowered, we will empower you, rank and file, and the people. And alignment or accountability, you can call it accountability, is whatever decisions as seniors I take, I shall be fully accountable. But you as people also be accountable towards the laws and regulations of the city. So when you give a T mantra and a mission statement, so because I had a T mantra and had a mission statement, I had a purpose in performance, I took on the vested interest. But as public servants, that's not the challenge we always have. We may have run into vested interest, we may not. There's a whole chapter even on that, how we took the legal judgments, how we were threatened by the politicians taking me to courts every time, and Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Lieutenant Governor's responsibilities. So that's a history for you to have a look, for leaving questions for you. You asked me one more question to say, what would be my advice to all students who want to follow and become future leaders? Do you want to know this question answer now or later, Mr. Agarwal?
Ma'am, as per your wish, I mean, if you think it fits here, then perhaps right now would be the best time to have it.
Okay, let me wind up this with it. Let me get the questions first.
Sure.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you firstly for this session, ma'am. We touched upon very important topics like the prevalence of hierarchy, training, and importance of starting your day right, walking the path, social order, and even knowing your people, connecting an emotional quotient. And I'm sure that the students over here also have a lot of questions along these lines and from your journey over here. So the audience sitting with us at the moment, if you have any questions, kindly raise your hands and we'll reach to you. Yes. Uh,
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am.
Rohan, could you please face the camera? Ma'am is, yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am, for such an enlightening question, such an enlightening session. As we go through the fourth revolution, which is AI revolution, be it private sector and public sector, every one of us are talking about a digital revolution and Atmanirbhar Bharat. So my question is, how can we thrive during our ongoing disruption, and at the same time, how can we future-proof our organization and our people? As you have talked about the power of we and not me in your book, Fearless Governance. So how can we do that?
By staying alive, staying on your toes and not resting on your oars, being alive to whatever is happening, sensing around and anticipating the change. But if you rest on your oars in easy rocking chairs back in the air-conditioned rooms and not be available to people, not accessible, not listening, not reading, not researching, you will be behind time. That means the more up to date you are in what is going around, yet be prepared for disruption. We did not know COVID would come. None of us were prepared. We had no medical students involved. We had dispensaries defunct. We didn't have the PP kits. We didn't have the other equipment which we needed. We didn't. But then we rose to the occasion. But why not? Now you're anticipating. Now you have 40 medical colleges inaugurated by the Prime Minister of India in UP. Now you have many more. That's being proactive. Now you're building more highways. Now you are creating these innovation cells. You are being proactive. Yet be prepared for anything. So it's my question is, I think one of the best thing our Prime Minister did was, he's not listening, so I can tell you that I'm not doing it for him. The point is, I'm only proving a point. When COVID struck, one of the finest thing which our political leadership did was get to the vaccination. Had they not taken it, and they invested a lot of money, they pumped a lot of money into it. That is good. That is it. That was anticipation. We scored because we finally got the vaccination. And today, India has saved hugely because of the vaccination. But that was an investment at that time. You pumped in money without knowing that we will be able to create one. But we didn't create one. We created more than one. And we also exported it. So I think it's being anticipatory, being risk-oriented, being informed, researched, on your toes, being mobile, and you'll see you will be able to think ahead. And listening to your junior colleagues, because then you're getting ideas from all directions.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Ma'am, I had a question.
Yeah.
Like, does leadership also include like taking out of the box steps always, even when there is not a need of doing so?
Of course, yes. You must keep modifying. You must keep reinventing. If you don't reinvent, you are already stale. One of your earlier speakers very beautifully convinced. Because then you're, see, that's what one of them said.
improvement अपने अंदर जो लाना चाहिए या बहुत सारी चीजें.
Somebody's speaking in between.
Please check.
Please switch off your mics.
IT team, please check. Please switch off your mics.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
So is that Shrikar? Somebody said that they answered that every company is earning, they generate, where are they earning the new revenue from for a new product or for a new research and an invention? That's a risk factor. And that's where, so every company is looking for a new software, a new product, right? New marketing technique, a new strategy, a new office, a new branch, a new acquisition, a new collaboration. That's called reinvention. That's how you keep growing. That's where acquisitions and collaborations come. a new product. What did Indira Nooyi do? She brought the Quaker coats. One of the first things she did was to buy up the Quaker coats. She gave a whole new image to PepsiCo. Saying it's not fizz water only. It's also got nutrition, a food which you like to have as a breakfast. And that's how she multiplied, not just by staying only on the fizz water. Because
Thank you, ma'am.
you ask her, when I read her book, Living Life Full, she said she saw, as she was socializing, people were not picking up PepsiCo. They were looking for, that's how they got Tropicana. They said, when I saw, people are not looking at, they were no more drinking, they were becoming conscious of calories, the sweet water. So she reduced the sugar. Then she said, but I need to have something more on the table. That's how the Tropicanas came and other stuff came. So it's all by her observation. That's what you need to do. So acquisitions, observations, and then she hired some of the best researchers. She hired some of the best researchers to research to make sure that this PepsiCo is minimal in sweetening. And she spent a lot of money. That was investment. Now, does it work or not? It did work for her, but risk taking is a part of your growth. New product, new invention, reinvention. Yes, next.
Yes, Nikhil, could you please ask a question to ma'am? Please face the camera. Yeah.
Yeah. Good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, I had a doubt when we were talking about the potholes and then you were going from one place to another place every day in the morning and looking for what were the discrepancies and assigning the person who was in charge for it and how much time he can fix. And I was thinking, can this not be automatically automated? Like we were also talking about the user social audit. So ma'am, when different people click the pictures of the potholes and then for that we can keep the counter of it, and ma'am, then based upon the data analytics of the database, we can find out who was assigned the particular role for it, and from that we can directly create a ticker for it, that who is supposed to clear it, and ma'am, for that there would be a certain specific number of time. So
but remember in medical services, you still need to see the doctor.
Yes,
even if you digitize everything in medicine, you still want to see the doctor, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
So some things can be digitized. Do digitize, no harm. Do digitize, photograph, make app, make application, make an app. People are using an app. There are apps available. People are putting up the apps of the traffic violators. It's working. So you have the app and both, but there is no substitute to your human presence. Remember that. You can automate so much. You can have robots around, but there is no substitute to the human hand. You can do both. Okay, next. Next, please.
Next question.
Hey, it can't be that whatever I said meets all your needs.
Ma'am, I had a question, like, since we are focusing on Atmanirbhar Bharat, that is self-reliant India. So ma'am, is there any scope of rebuilding our very traditional industries which are diminishing in number, at the same time pushing forward the fifth generation industries like the drone sector or the space, etc. in the future? And that is my question. Can we do a mixture of the traditional Indian architecture or textiles along with the future or the modern technologies also?
I think it's going to be all the times of survival of the fittest. As long as they continue to survive their life, if they're decaying, the new generation will then, it is survival of the fittest. So if they want to progress more, they want to generate more, they'll have to change. Times will compel them to change. Be a next generation, because it will come back better educated, better qualified. Or it's losing concern, so they'll shut it down and sell it as a real estate. So it's all situational. Next. Oh, 90 जा रही? No voice? कब से नहीं जा रही?
No, ma'am, voice is coming. We can hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Pooja. It is going, madam. Okay, now I don't want to be disturbed. The voices,
Navya?
you're hearing me?
Yes, ma'am.
Very well.
Yes.
Next.
Navya Lal.
Yes, good afternoon, ma'am. Ma'am, as you know, India follows a quasi-federal form of government. So how does a person can thrive and rise in the environment of hierarchy and when there is distribution of power at different levels?
Well, there is a bureaucracy everywhere. All India civil services are selected and given over to the state cadres. All of them have to perform their duties. Politicians will come and go, changed, but they have to be cleared. And remember, responsibility is not of the politician. He'll come and go every 5 years. It's a bureaucrat. The Auditor General will follow you. The CBI will follow you. The Enforcement Director will follow you. Police station investigator follow you. So the bureaucrats, that's what the stability. This is how administration, civil service is the sheet anchor of the government. That's what it's called the steel frame. The steel frame remains. The others come and go. The locks and keys may come and go, but the steel frame remains. And the steel frame is the bureaucracy. And each officer is responsible for his or her role, her decision on the file, note sheet. And if they want to be cowards, it's up to them. If they want to be conformity, it's up to them. If they want to be courageous, it's up to them. They be honest, it's up to them. If they want to be dishonest, it's up to them. If they want to be fair, it's up to them. If they're unfair, it's up to them. Each one will have its own consequences. You will have to make a choice. You want to be afraid? Okay, people will scare you. You be honest, people will challenge you. Be ready for the challenge. If you are a conformist, you will be status quo. You'll go back as a person who's unwritten. You'll come and go unsung. It's up to you. If you want to be investor, people will remember you behind your back. वो आया था और ये आई थी वो काम करके गई. हम अभी भी याद करते. It's up to you. What purpose you come to the service with? But states, federalism is fine. That's why every state has a chief secretary. Every state has its own DGP. Every state has its own police force. Every state has its own civil service. But that remains. People will come, they will ऊपर वाले आएंगे, transfer कर देंगे इधर उधर. But service is the same. That's it. It's up to you to be coward, conformist, or courageous. It's up to you. You can be a conformist, fine, status quo. You can be coward, it's up to you. And you can be a courageous person, it's up to you. Depends on who you are. What's your character? How did you grow up? What kind of grooming did you get in your families? What kind of education you get? It's all going to be visible in your decision making as you sit on those chairs. Or it's a corporate world, it's the same way. If the corporate world doesn't suit you, you do your own startup, be your own master, and you will employ people rather than be employed. It's up to you. You want to be an employer or an employee? It's up to you. These are your choices you make. Nobody told me to join the Indian Police Service. It was my choice. I joined. I thrived. I survived it. I fought it. I had this vested interest. I dealt with them. I didn't complain. I didn't cry. I just dealt with it because I wanted it. I loved it. I respected it. I was willing to take on the challenges as they came. I was not afraid. I was not afraid because I was ready to moving out anywhere. For me, from Andamans to Jammu Kashmir is beautiful. So I'm willing to go. So why am I afraid? With a low family pack, then there's nobody. But if you become heavy, then you're heavyweight. Then you are overweight. Then you are finding it difficult to move. I remained light. I was ready to pack and go. So they were afraid of me rather than I was afraid of them. That's the point.
Thank you, ma'am. Due to paucity of time, we could perhaps accommodate one final question, if anyone.
No, let's finish rather than one question. I want to give you the last answer because I think that should make us finish at 3:15.
That suits, ma'am.
Good. Please. Now the advice to the students. You said to become better future. Number one, stay agile. Number one. Two, keep preparing. Focus on preparation. Prior preparations, staying agile, prior preparation. Constantly upskill, constantly. There's no stopping you. Constantly upskill, whatever online courses, big line courses, short line courses, please go in for upskilling. Need-based, your finances be need-based. Don't move towards extravagance. If you're starting on startup, please go need-based, draw minimal, invest more. Because if you start consuming more, even at a startup, you have nothing back to invest. So draw only need-based and not greed-based. Fifth, collaborate. Sixth, please research, remain research-oriented. Upskilling means also research-oriented. That means being alive. Unfortunately, you got everything in your hands in the computer. Constantly reinvent. Look at your invention, seeing how can you do it better. There's a better way of doing everything today. Today, there's a better way of doing, or maintain the right way. Even maintenance is a very important reinvention because you're challenged by competitors. Remain supportive and empowering to your rank and file. Upskill them as also. Empower, as I already explained to you in 101. Maintain a very positive mindset. No depressions, no stress, no worries. If you do the morning routine, the morning nutrition, feeding yourself, preparing for your morning, if you don't rush your morning, if you prepare your morning, you will remain positive. You'll not say, "Main bada worry, how do I do? I have two decisions." If you meditate, your decisions will come in your conscience will speak to you. It did. In fact, you must read my morning nutrition chapter in the book. It's called Morning Nutrition, how I set it up. So have it. And the finally last question, 10 points I gave you, is self-audit. When you sit quietly, going for self-talk, self-audit. Sometimes you can do talking to your friends, relatives, families, but your self-talk is your best. Maybe go for a walk and do a little self-talk and listen to yourself as we become two persons. Agar main ye karu, mujhe mera, so become a mirror to yourself. So mirror yourself with any doubts and talk to yourself. You will start getting better answers. Of course, you can consult, but I think self-audit and self-mirroring is very, very important. These are my 10 points of the last question you asked me, friends, that the ideas I could give you for becoming future leaders. But you've had some very good lectures prior to my coming. I'm only adding a little bit to that, but I think those were great questions. I look forward to actually the scripts of those questions, these two. Can I get them, Mr. Agrawal?
Yeah, sure, ma'am. We'll make sure that they are mailed to you.
Hanji, mailed to me at the scripts of these. They're
Sure.
treasures for me too. I made my notes, of course,
Yeah.
while listening to you. Okay, thank you very much. I think we met the time. You can have in time the next speaker.
That was an extremely insightful and thought-provoking session, ma'am. I now request Dr. Pankaj K. Agrawal, Chairperson, Executive Education, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, students. So very good afternoon, Dr. Kiran ma'am. It's my singular privilege to have been invited to propose a vote of thanks in this session. On a personal note, I have been reading about you for a long, long time. As a student, we used to read about you. We used to see you on TV, hear about you. And somehow over the years, it so happened that whatever you achieved and did, they became a source of inspiration. And again, on a very personal note, whenever I get some assignment which I find is not up to my liking, let me share with you, ma'am, I am reminded of your assignment of the Harjay. And I draw inspiration from it, that if you could convert that posting into an opportunity, I think nothing could be harder than that. And I confess that your challenge that you have taken, the way you have handled it, continues to inspire me personally, and I'm sure to all my students who have known and read about you. Also, ma'am, you have set an example how to have a balanced personal life too. And when I talk to my family, conflicting priorities between spouses and all those things, again, I'm sharing with you that at times we have had your mention during our conversation that how you have managed it all. So, okay, I think I'm getting a little emotional, but ma'am, it's a real honor for me to be on the same stage with you today. I wish it were physical, not digital. Anyway, whatever I have opted, I think that is something I accept gracefully. Ma'am, summarizing your session is very difficult because I'm sure my students must be feeling like a greedy child getting into a departmental store where they have so many goodies that they're not sure which one to really like more and which one to leave. So you covered the aspects ranging from administration. And one thing I really liked was the order in which you took it all. You started with self-management. And I think unless a person can manage oneself, starting with the morning routine, It's very, very difficult to really manage others and manage your career, etc. And then you went on to, and especially the focus on one-on-one in this day of email and virtual meetings, and today reach it. I think, ma'am, these are the gems which are going to resonate with us for a very, very long time. And ma'am, though you were in administration, but I could see echoes of whatever we teach in business schools in your entire talk. You talked about keeping your finger on the pulse of your clients, your customers, your field. All that is something that we've been talking about in business management. And coming from you, I think that carries that additional touch of credibility, which our students do not find otherwise. So I'm sure, ma'am, your presence here has inspired us all. We know your busy schedule. I'm sure so much of demands on your time. It was really very kind of you to have accepted our invitation and to have delivered your talk, especially tailored to the needs of these youngsters. And we are so very grateful. We wish we could have you here in Jammu and Kashmir at our campus physically. We will look forward to having that opportunity. And we are sure, ma'am, next time when we request you to be here, you will definitely try and grace our campus by your benign presence. So I thank you, ma'am. I have really no words to express my gratefulness to you. And yes, one last thing, ma'am, the best thing is that today you have not just concluded this session, you have also ensured that after your talk is over, we have a resource which we can continue to refer to through your book and continue to keep learning from you. That is the beauty of a teacher, ma'am. We in teaching do this, and you, without being a teacher, have done this. That's really wonderful. Thank you for that. And I thank my students for being present here, all the technical staff for making this session a successful one. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Wish you all the very best. We'll keep reading and hearing about you in the Economic Times and the Financial Express. Some of you, and we'll know where you're coming from. Thank you and all the best. Thank you, Mr. Agarwal, once again, and the entire institute, the Jammu Institute, your Vice Chancellor, your directors and the faculty, and all of you students. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
After such an interesting discussion with Kiran Bedi ma'am, we move back to the topic, the Great Reset, navigating through disruption at workplace. We now have with us Mr. J.B. Singh. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you all?
Sir, all good, sir. So, Sir is a seasoned professional and a leader with over 33 years of experience across leading hotels, airlines, distribution, technology companies. He is currently the president and CEO of Interglobe Hotels, a joint venture between Interglobe Enterprise and Accor Asia Pacific established in 2004 to develop a network of hotels throughout India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. He holds a postgraduate BTEC diploma in management from Oxford Brookes University, UK. Sir founded the Thalassemia Blood Transfusion Association and has been a past president of SCAL Delhi. He is keen outdoor enthusiast and takes special interest in mentoring and coaching CXOs and startups, especially those engaged with rural development. It is our honor to have you here with us, sir.
Likewise, thank you.
The virtual stage is over to you now.
Okay, lovely, and it's always wonderful to speak to future leaders. The topic is really interesting given the times that we are going through it, and I think it's very, very important for all you young leaders to sort of come to terms on what disruption is, how quickly it comes, how quickly it goes, or is disruption something that is continuous? So before we get into what's going on currently in a kind of a COVID or a post-COVID kind of a situation, we have to understand that there have been large megatrends that run across the universe, creating disruptions at all times. So some of the big disruptors that are going on today are around urbanization, massive disruption. By 2030, the shape of cities will change and we'll end up, it is estimated, with about 33 megacities across the world, and 70% will be in Asia. Cities like Delhi will become the largest metropolis in the world and will house 38 million people. Other disruptions like around energy, which is today a $200 billion industry. The demand is growing almost at a 20% CAGR level, and this industry is expected by 2040 to get to almost $40 trillion. Technology, something that's impacting our day-to-day lives, is expected to cross $6 trillion by 2030. So all big numbers. What I'm really saying is disruption is continuous. It's happening all the time. There are large megatrends that come, and then suddenly you have a situation like we've just been through, regrettably, with COVID, or other sort of disruptions that come and go sometimes, in which are very regional specific. This, of course, after many years has been something that's globally sort of specific. It starts to accelerate several components of disruptions and start to create a form, a new order faster than it was happening before. So in the short term, here's what things like this do. Creates a lot of chaos, creates a lot of ambiguity. So whilst there's ambiguity with the macro trends, something like, a COVID or another sort of a disruptor creates immediate ambiguity. It's like you're fine today and something starts to change from tomorrow. Your business model starts to get tested within 24 hours when something new unleashes. The balance sheets start to go that you really have to take, very sort of drastic measures to control that. And along with all this, in the short term, you have to deal with a lot of employee anxiety, colleagues' anxiety, which is something that has come to the forefront in the last 2 years, and something that possibly a lot of the world was not looking at it as meaningfully as it should have been. But here's what happens in the long term. When disruption happens, change. Costs start to go up, competition becomes larger and larger. And then on the side of all of this, you've got government influence, and we must never forget societal needs. And we'll talk a little more about it towards the end of my talk. So if you were to take, say, one big disruption that's happened in the last 2 years, which was something that was already a lot of work going on for the last 30, 40 years, was really that the world started to recognize and embrace, at the onset of the digital world. Now, when I've spoken about so many disruptions, it sounds very complex, and then it brings us to the main theme of what is it that we really need to do. Leaders going forward, because disruptions are getting faster and faster and more profound, will need to deal with several paradoxes, and you need to hear this carefully. Leaders will need to learn to slow down to catch up. Leaders will need to learn to accomplish more by doing less. Leaders will need to embrace uncertainty and still drive growth. Leaders will need to be agile, but they still need to take everyone along. Leaders will need to go global, but they will need to remain authentic. Leaders need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, which means, and I heard last bits of Kiran Bedi, and she spoke very clearly around self-development. Leaders will need to invest in themselves, transformation. And there was a lot said about by Kiran Bedi in the last session. Something that I always propagate to people, including and try and practice myself, is around mind, body, and soul, which means leaders need to keep upskilling themselves, keep learning new trends, do lots of research, and nourish their minds all the time with new information, whether through listening, whether through seeing, whether through education, or whether through research. Leaders need to remain fit. And India is very far from being a very, very fit country. So which means my suggestion to all you young leaders is embrace fitness. You need to be fit so you can work harder, faster, think more clearly, and be more in control with yourself. And the third thing that I propagate is soul. Leaders need to build a universe with empathy around themselves, which means they must connect themselves with themselves spiritually. Kiran Bedi again spoke about it, that you need to get out in the walk, you need to listen to yourself, you need to listen to your own conscience. Self-awareness is something fundamental to become a good leader. So once you get into such a disrupted environment, what are some of the things that a good leader needs to do very, very quickly? And now I'm going to make an assumption that you are leaders or you've become leaders who are sort of well-nourished in mind, body, and soul, and you have a pretty good understanding of what's going around you as best an understanding that you can have. So the first thing that every leader needs to do is needs to simplify the context. So when the world has become chaotic, ambiguous, etc., leaders have to very quickly identify the simplicity of the problem and articulate it very clearly to all stakeholders. So it starts to ease tensions and give people clear direction and clear goals. So rather than giving 45 instructions, smart leaders who simplify the context will come up with 3 or 4 high priority goals, because they will understand through a variety of methods that leaders will use, including awareness, that, hey, if we touch these 4 things, this should start to correct the sort of a free fall or start to clear the fog that we are going through. Leaders have to learn very, very quickly. But above all, when leaders do this, they need to ensure that they maintain transparency and ethical leadership. Because when there's chaos and there's sort of vulnerability to business and tensions, quite often leaders could tend to have the danger of slipping into a non-communicative sort of an environment and bring transparency to a grinding halt and push their organization or the teams into a sort of a more darker space than they need to be. So some fundamental skills that leaders need to build. And for me, I always believe that the most essential skill that every leader must build on is the ability and the power to communicate. A leader has to communicate their vision, their beliefs, their values, their business model to all stakeholders, governments, customers, colleagues, and so on and so forth. So you need to master the skill of communication. And as they say, that to master the skill of communication, first need to get on top of the subject. And once you're on top of the subject, it's a belief that takes over. And don't sort of misinterpret master communication means to get very good at language. Communication happens through all mediums. You may not have the right language skills in a particular language. I have seen people communicate and do a speech using 5 or 6 or 7 different languages, but 1,000 people in the room know exactly what that person is saying. So to communicate means body language, but most importantly, your own belief in what you're trying to communicate, which means you build on interpersonal skills, be respectful, and you have to be able to inspire and motivate. A good leader will have to build skills to galvanize and empower people, because through communication and through their own beliefs, they must do what one of the modern emerging terms is mob organizing, should be able to build a mob and galvanize people in a particular direction. Leaders in a disrupted environment needs to build a lot of agility, which means a leader will have to be able to cross-communicate across all sections of the business seamlessly and make sure that all sections of the business get connected towards a common agenda. But above all, to navigate a crisis, leaders will need to master the art to co-create. So now that's a big trend that leaders need to understand is moving from a directional leadership, authoritarian leadership, to a leadership which is more empowering and is sort of upside down, where the bottom end of the organization starts to build and co-create what the business needs to do. So which means the leader has to now start getting into a mode of deep empowering. So they listen to the business, listen to the environment, and co-create it along with the team. This is very, very important. When we recently went through a crisis, we did that extensively. I mean, whenever this started sometime in March, but I think by April, we already had teams who were working on a variety of different projects and telling us, as an organization, what we should be doing. And once you get into a strong environment of communication, empowering, co-creation, that drives leadership to make a very, very solid decision to reset the mission, which means you need to be agile, you need to be able to reset the mission, reset the strategy, and get into this new environment, with a very, very clear mind, with very structured sort of goals. Now, just a word of caution, every time I use the word agility, I also need to bring in the word of consistency. Sometimes over-agile organizations can get wrapped up, in their own problem. Every time we think agility, we also have to think discipline and consistency. Other than disruption, we also have to remember that, India is fast, unstructured moves to structured. So that's something that's going to be around for some time to come, as you as leaders will have to learn to deal with it very, very effectively. Hybrid workplaces are things that are going to be common space. And it is not just about work from home, but it is also about remote servicing. It is the ability to reach out to skills which do not necessarily sit in your geography. Something like this, all of you folks out there in Jammu can actually be sitting in Jammu and listening to people across the country. I'm right now in my office in Gurgaon, and I'm sure most of the other speakers were across the country. So which means it empowers the organization to draw in services, from a remote perspective. Reskilling will become fundamental because as technology changes fast and business model changes fast, we need to stay agile with our learning. So therefore, leaders will have to not only just skill themselves, but ensure that the organization is in a continuous sort of a learning model. This is not a new theory. It has existed for generations. It's nothing new, but it's something that we need to keep re-emphasizing to organizations, that when you go through disruption, it calls for deeper learning and much more sort of connected learning across functions. And amongst learning is very, very important to build what is called power skills. Now there is a functional skill, right? So some of you are studying management in different sort of verticals, but then there is power skills. Power skills are skills that will help you become more adaptable. It will create strong networks. Sometimes you need to work harder and maybe sort of come up with, like design thinking as an example. So building power skills will become fundamental as you're navigating this sort of a situation. Technology, very, very important to not understand technology in its truest sense, but understand the rigors of technology and what it can do to collect data for your organization and empower with you, with more information and sort of give you a more competitive edge as you move on. You need to define and sort of separate efficiency to resilience. When you're in a disrupted environment, sometimes efficiency may not be your best weapon. You need to build more and more resilience. So that's where agility comes in, is do I need to be efficient? Do I need to be resilient? It's a dichotomy that we have to work with. Above all, the organization has to work with diverse talent, because in an ambiguous environment, you can get blindsided from any side. So which means you need people who are completely connected with organizational goals, coming from variety of disciplines, and in some cases, coming also from disciplines where your organization does not even exist, or it's not a core of your organization. Because what a digital universe will also do, it'll also give highways for cross-industry to connect with each other and drive performance. As you would have seen with a lot of, online models that come up, they start with selling books, for example, typical Amazon, Flipkart model, they start with music, and then, they're selling everything, which means they go cross-industry and sort of create an environment which moves so fast across so many disciplines across the industry. So which means you need diverse talent for you or for us to think through our businesses to say, hey, we can do this, we can connect with this, even if we are not in that business. But if you don't sort of bring this element of the business in, we may struggle. So for example, you will have industries, let's say, who are in pharma, possibly getting into and acquiring companies that do online billing, so they can drag in data on how pharma products are getting consumed by geography, by clientele, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, as we are going to start running out of my 30-minute slot in the next few, the planet and leaders of tomorrow, well, actually leaders of today, and all of us, me included, we have to be very, very sort of focused on how our businesses are impacting the planet and what we can do, as organizations, to control not just the carbon footprint, et cetera, but even in countries like ours and many other countries that are developing, and what we can do for our society. So whether it is CSR, whether it's sustainability, leaders with that level of empathy must be able to galvanize the organization, connect all stakeholders, whether it's the government, whether it is their customers, whether it's their colleagues, and work towards these common perspectives around building a society. And I think finally, I would like to just end by saying that I started out by saying the whole world is disrupting, which means there is an onset of a digital world, which is leading to a far more connected world that was there, let's say, 20, 30 years ago. And in this sort of a hyper-connected world, leaders must be very passionate to remain connected across the functions, remain connected across their partners, remain connected, across geographies. So I think a very highly connected world, lots of ambiguous, strong leaders that you're developing, build in that spirit of adventure, build in that spirit of going into the unknown and finding solutions and looking for new world orders and sort of drive them. You have that opportunity at your age. Seize it, work towards it, and be very, very focused. And whilst everything is so ambiguous, agile, etc., I think it's very, very important for leaders to be very disciplined. And I think Kiranji also spoke about it. You need to sort of stay fit. You need to stay, within your mind and your body, etc. But you need to be disciplined. You need to be very clear-sighted. You need to build that belief, build it through friends, colleagues, yourself, whichever way you like, but remain disciplined. Start early. All good leaders will start very, very early. There's a very famous book, The 5 a.m. Club. I mean, just pick it up and read, and you'll find that. The morning hours just give you so much sort of time to plan yourself. Now, do it over a walk, do it over some yoga, or do it whatever. But get into using your morning very, very efficiently to collect your thoughts, to think through it, or just to stay fit. But start early and embrace the day, with a lot of passion and a lot of grit. And with that, I wish all of you lots of success in this journey of yours. I'm sure, the IIM at Jammu is doing a fantastic job. So best wishes with that. And I would love to take on any questions if there are.
We are all very grateful to hear from you today, sir. Thank you so much for this profound and insightful session, where you listed down key traits of a leader in this highly disruptive world and how communication lies at the center of all of this. Sir, if you allow, can I take a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Your question. Sir, since you're very closely related to the hospitality industry, and I guess the disruption has been the highest in the hospitality sector. So I am an aspiring entrepreneur. I would like to ask a question that what are the new trends emerging in the hospitality industry and how can we tap on them?
Yes, indeed. So hospitality, travel, tourism in general were amongst or possibly the worst hit. A lot of experiential products are coming back into the mainframe, which means today, if we were to see some of the new trends that are coming up in the last 2 years, leisure, which was always growing very fast, is continuing to grow even faster. So that's one. People are looking for experiences. But that doesn't mean that the big box hotels will lose their relevance. But say in markets like ours, we will see more and more spending coming in, in experiential travel, boutique hotels where customers are looking for more intimacy, hotels which have, libraries or small bars or places where they can relax with friends. So that's one. Leisure will continue to remain very, very strong. leisure has always grown faster than corporate travel globally. And that trend is going to continue. But one thing that's going to be quite significant in this industry is going to be the influx of technology. So whilst technology was there, the industry was not hyper-connected through technology. The airlines are very savvy in technology. They started building systems much earlier, but hospitality still needs to do a lot of work. So I think a lot of that will come in place. And something more pertinent to South Asia, where we are, health, hygiene, cleanliness, etc., will take the forefront. Today, after COVID, customers are looking for those kind of trends. They will want hotels that are cleaner, clean kitchens, clean food, clean rooms, etc., etc. So these are some of the big areas. A lot of the hotels will digitize. And finally, and I don't think that's going to happen very, very fast, but digital trends also disrupt distribution. And distribution is a very key element of a business. It's got high costs. And this will also, going forward, drive advent of very high quality of channel management, online players, and hotels will have the ability to reach and distribute directly to the consumer.
Thank you, sir. I will certainly keep your talk in mind whenever I venture into the big world of entrepreneurship. Thank you, sir. This was a truly interactive session, and I'm sure our students had much to learn from this, as well as I. While I wish the discussion would go on forever, we are unfortunately bound by time constraints, and I would again extend my heartfelt gratitude towards you and for you to giving us your time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here, and wish all of you the very best. Bye-bye.
With an incredible, insightful, and informative discussion on workplace disruptions and leadership journey of our speakers, we now shift gear for an equally engaging topic of discussion: gig economy, unlocking the potential of an independent workforce. A gig economy challenges the traditional economy of full-time workers and opens the door for temporary and flexible jobs that has created gig contractors into a company's workforce. Is made the entire workforce support cycle must be rethought for gig workers, ranging from recruitment and performance management to training and development, employee retention, and more. This discussion will cast light upon the challenges and potential of independent workforce engagement in the contribution to the economic growth of the country.
Our keynote speaker for this panel is Mr. Ramesh Kailasam, the CEO of indiatech.org, a company that serves as a collaborative platform and voice of the Indian consumer internet startup unicorns and their investors to support positive business, conducive policies and regulations. Mr. Kailasam has over 20 plus years of experience in government relations and is well renowned for his inputs and insights in leadership building, market entry, research, competitiveness, strategy, formulation, and its implementation. He has extensive experience working in various first-of-their-kind and path-breaking technology projects across sectors, resulting in central policy changes. Despite his illustrious corporate achievements, he has authored over 100 plus papers and policy recommendations implemented by various governments. ICI also awarded him Young Achiever Award under the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Sir, I would like you to take center stage now.
Thank you so much, IIM Jammu, for having me today. I hope I am audible and clear.
Yes, sir, you're audible. Thank you.
Great. And I thank the organizers for coming up with this wonderful topic, which is gig economy. Much is often confused about gig economy, so I thought I'll get into basics, as I always do, and take you through a journey of what it means and what it has in future. Being a practitioner of public policy, I will always take the practicality route to explain these things out, primarily because life is all about, I mean, you do learn theory in classes, but practical life is what matters the most. And putting this theory into practice gets you the kick of seeing it work or not work. So I'll not take much time around it, but let me start with gig economy. And before that, let's look at basically, I mean, there was a time, I mean, these were 100-year-old companies. I was working for a company called IBM, International Business Machines, which is more than 100 years old. And when we were in the 100th year, I came across a lot of people who had combinedly put more than 100 years. I mean, in my team in other parts of the world, there were people with 37 years experience, 35 years experience, all on just one company. Now, that's a great thing to have for companies because you've got manpower which is stuck onto you for a long time. But at the same time, it's interesting that when I did ask the question to many of them saying, okay, how is it that you managed to stay for 37 odd years in the same company or 35 odd years in the same company? And the answer was very simple. We had migrated at the time when there were wars, and coincidentally, we are talking wars. And therefore, we somehow made it to the United States. And my parents were working as farm workers. And then our aim was just go to school and manage to get across the end of the field where there was a factory. And therefore, the motivations were different those days. And that is what led to people moving towards a factory job, a 9-to-5 job, and so on. Now things are changing and technology is enabling all of those. And therefore, the perception of job is also changing, both in terms of employers and in terms of employees. Increasingly, I'm coming across folks who are saying, maybe I will not do a 9-to-5 job. Maybe I will not be working under a single employer. So therefore, there's a huge perception change. So that comes across to the word gig. Now, the term gig is a slang word. I hope all of you are aware of what a slang is. Well, I was not aware when I heard it the first time. And during my time, people told me that slang stands for silly language adopted by new generation. And they were referring to us, our generation, saying, you guys speak anything and everything, you just pull out some words. And that was nothing when compared to, I would say that was kindergarten when compared to the kind of terms that are thrown by the current generation. So slang for us was ridiculed to say our generation had adopted a silly language and this was a new generation adopting it. So gig basically means a very informal or more common way of work and typically was meant to do works which are not specifically something that required you a defined period of time and engagement. So basically freelancers, independent contractors, project-based workers, these were the kind of part-time hires. These were the kind of names that were thrown in. But considering that people were talking, saying, okay, you school kids are throwing up these slangs, let's go back to school. And the interesting part is, and this is where the practicality of life comes in, is does India need gig workers? And the big answer is yes, for the simple reason that if you look at the number of children who are born, and I might be wrong by a few thousands or a few lakhs, that doesn't matter in a large population like India, but typically let's assume that 2.5 crore children are born every year. And that's the number based on the number of children who are born per second or per year or per day and so on. So let's assume 2.5 crore children are born every year, which is a fact. And there is an infant mortality rate which takes away around 8 lakh children every year. So we are left with 2.4 crores to be precise. Now, as per the government data, 89% join school. So, which means that 2.2 crores have joined school. The remaining did not join school, the 11%. 2% dropped out at the primary level, 2% dropped out at the upper primary level. This after multiple rounds of improvement in the quality of education and retention of children in primary schools. So now we are left with 2.1 crore. I'm just sticking to people going to school and having education. 18% drop down at secondary school level. So now we are left with 1.7 crore. Then 9.6% dropout at the higher education level. So now we are left with 1.5 crore. And then there are estimates that around 8 lakh people go abroad to study. The Prime Minister keeps telling that you need to have more and more universities in India, more world-class universities, and people should study here. But still we have a situation where 8 lakh students travel abroad for higher education and spend billions of dollars in this process. So therefore, estimates say that there are $6 billion that go as fees to foreign universities. And then therefore, you are left with a portion of population which is studying in India, which, and for your information, and there's a well-known fact that passing college means it can be just the pass mark, and it can be with distinction, it can be with your DU, so-called DU cutoffs of 99.99 and so on. So getting into colleges and so on. So you have all kinds of people. But when we look at the job market, and I'm talking about the urban crowd, we often look at the papers and say, oh, TCS is hiring so much, Infosys is hiring so much, Wipro is hiring so much, IBM, Dell, HPs are hiring so much. So if you add that number in, it might come to a few lakhs. But one thing we tend to forget is that out of the 2.4 crore who are born and 2.2 crore who manage to survive and live, they also become adults and they also need jobs. It is not that they stopped growing. And therefore, we should not be fixated with the fact of how many jobs are getting created, because we often tend to look at that creamy layer which is getting the jobs. So what is different from India and the rest of the world? I'm being blunt here to say that we are a civilized country. The reason we are civilized is, for lack of a better word, if you don't get a job, I will open a dukan. That's how it was in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So we now have 7.5 crore shops in the country. We have 4.5 crore hawkers in the country. This shows a determination for entrepreneurship and being self-employed, because it is honorable to be employed and dishonorable to be unemployed. And therefore, this urge that we have always had led us to the situation where people often looked for creating their own employment or creating their own pieces, and being self-employed also became a matter of pride. So you have plumbers, electricians, carpenters, all of them are self-employed today. They come to your place, they do your job, and they go away. Now, slowly, if you look at it, a large chunk of employment, therefore, is not employment or a job, but work. People look for work. People don't necessarily look for jobs. If we were to create jobs, and this is something why we need to clarify and discuss in the Indian context, is we are different from the West on this matter. When somebody says that there are so many gig workers in US, so many gig workers in London, and so on, we are talking about a few thousands. We are not talking 2.4 crores that gets added every year to this population. And that piles on, right? Every year. It's not necessary that somebody just graduated out, gets into a job. They wait for, and they keep adding to that pool of people who need work or need employment. So when somebody says that we need to give employment, we need to be very careful and clear that, can we employ so many people? Are there so many jobs? Manufacturing jobs are becoming more and more tech savvy. So what's happening is that, we are talking about chip manufacturing. It's a semiconductor fab, requires the size of a football field, a factory. You will have at least 3 floors, 3 football fields, employing 25 to 30 people per shift, 75 to 100 people max. Now, a large factory, which is tech savvy, will employ only so much. So therefore, gone are those days where we were looking at the 40s, 50s, and 60s, where a factory would employ hundreds of people. Those things are gone. As we get more and more tech savvy, the lesser the hands that will be required. So therefore, what happens? The crowd in my generation and the previous generations who were earlier saying, if I don't have a job, maybe I will open a store, I will open a shop, I will self-employ myself and live honorably with respect and earn with respect. That is changing because the consumer of tomorrow is changing. And the consumer of tomorrow is sitting in this hall listening. This consumer of tomorrow wants everything at the swipe of a screen or a click of a button. Does not want to spend more time sitting in the markets, which is rightly so. I mean, you're living in a connected world, you have smartphones and so on. So therefore, there emerged business models for the new age customer, which was proven right during the pandemic, because had they not existed, urban India would have been struggling for access to goods and services. So there emerges the concept of gig economy, which is picking up. So the reason why I gave these numbers again is, if you look at Indian Railways today, one of the massive railway network, employs around roughly 12 to 15 lakh. I'm just giving a range because some estimates say it's 12, some say 15. But Railway Ministry requires a budget to be feeding all the people and basically giving employment and paying their salaries. Now imagine an Uber, Ola, or an urban company or any of that, Swiggy, Zomatos of the world, are told, okay, you have to employ these people. We are talking about something like 70, 80 lakh people, which is like 4 or 5 times the size of Indian Railways. Impossible, unless we see the next budget where on the floor of the house, we say, now we are allocating budget for employment for Swiggy, Zomato, and so on. So on a lighter vein, it wouldn't be impossible. It would be impossible. So therefore, it is important that we need to understand that gig economy is a model which gives work, need not be something that is dependent on what we call as a job as such, but at the same time should be covered from a social security standpoint, because you can't be having a situation where workers are working and going on. So if you look at what McKinsey had done, was they had long back come with what is called the segregation of gig workers in 4 categories. The first category was what they called as free agents. Basically, gig workers who undertake gig works by choice, depending on them for their primary source of income. So I might be saying, look, I don't want to be employed with anyone. I want to do my own job. I will take works here and there. I'll moonlight with different people. I'll do my work here and there, but this is my primary source of income. So these are called free agents. Then the second ones are gig workers who do supplemental income, basically to say casual earners that explore gig work opportunities out of choice as an extra side income. So I have some work, I'm having a job, but I don't think that's enough to keep me going. But I have this capability, so probably or this time, let me make use of that to get a supplemental income. The third ones, they call them the reluctants. Basically, gig workforce that is primarily dependent on gig jobs for making ends meet, and working on gigs is a necessity. So they are folks who are completely dependent on it, but they're reluctant, but they joined the gig force because they need this. And then there are the financially strapped ones, where gig workers who want to supplement their income and take up gig jobs out of, again, such a necessity that this is necessary for them to keep going, and they have no other choice. So in the traditional economy, while we had long-term salaried class of employees, what we call as 9 to 5 or 10 to 6 or whatever you want, the gig economy is consisting of short-term freelancers with no geographical boundaries. So it is not like, okay, the example where I said that I'm working in a field and I want to get into the factory, which is at the end of the field. Here I am available, whichever city calls, wherever it is required, and I can do whatever I want. Now, the gig economy now has extended into a lot of knowledge economy as well. So there are software developers who code and then get away. So you're no longer hiring an army of software developers, paying them, making them sit on the bench, not knowing when the next project will come. But you now take people available to code and get away as and when they require. So there are even knowledge economy works. In fact, high-end consulting also happens on the gig model, where people who are experts, supply chain experts, come fix your entire supply chain, do phenomenal amount of saving by rejigging and business process reengineering, and get going. So, and these are again not people who are employed in one particular organization. So basically, for better understanding purpose, the traditional job market was born as a result of speed and convenience much before the internet came in. And you obviously now have even better means of transportation than what it was in those days. So people were always looking at being close to place where there's work, which led to mass urbanization in places where factories existed. Now, if you look at what the internet has done, is internet has opened up the economy. Today, I can take work from anywhere. I can do gig work across on the internet. I can advise people and so on. So all of that is a kind of a gig work that we are into. The Factories Act or the 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act of other countries, all of them prescribed work hours. Now, gig economy doesn't believe on work hours. So there's also pride in the gig economy. For example, let it be a high-end consultant to a software developer to even a driver in an aggregator. The person would say, I own this car. I've taken it out of loan. I don't work for an Uber, Ola, or whoever it is, but I'm on their platform for the time being. And this car is my own, and I'm an independent guy. So that's the pride that speaks. You've seen ads where carpenters come out and say, I have a lot of work. I think that is the essence of gig economy, that more than jobs, it is about work. And therefore, practicality demands that we can't be creating 2 crore jobs. We might end up creating lakhs and lakhs of jobs, but not crores and crores of jobs. And the population doesn't wait to grow. So obviously, we are left with a situation where gig seems to be the way forward. Now, there are different types of gigs. There are different folks who are doing different kinds of jobs. For example, there's a report by Ola Mobility Institute. There's also a report by Boston Consulting Group, the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation reports. All of that state that gig economy can service up to 19 million jobs in India in the non-farm economy alone, which is roughly translating to something like $250 billion of work, which is almost like 1.25% of India's GDP. And this cuts across both skilled, semi-skilled, shared services, household services, unskilled jobs, and so on. So it's also proving mutually beneficial for companies because businesses are finding that hiring gig workers saves a lot of overhead costs, office space, equipment. I mean, I'm not required to, if I have 2 lakh people, doesn't mean that I have to now take something like a 1 lakh square feet office or a 2 lakh square feet office to make them sit and so on in different cities. It gives them flexibility of time, flexible work hours. But then the question comes in overarching saying, okay, you have these guys working across, but where is the social security that a job gives? And fortunately, a lot of debate happened in this front. And the government of India came out last year with the code on social security after amending, of course, the labor laws and so on. And the rules have come out and it's in various stages of implementation. What it basically says is that people who employ gig workers should give 1% of their turnover contribution to the fund, and both the state government and the central government will contribute their percentages. And this will become like an ESI kind of a model. So unorganized workers and gig workers now get covered from a social security standpoint. What was happening before this was companies were generally covering their own stuff by extending insurance benefits and so on. But now there are benefits like social security, term life, health insurance, family insurance, and so on, which are being embedded into this whole concept. So where does this leave us? I mean, in terms of as a nation, are we going to be forever creating gigs? Well, partly that's true because the consumer of tomorrow needs these services to get access to products and services that they want. But at the same time, the companies are also now beginning to realize that this is a different model. So a lot of startups have emerged in this space. I named a few of them. They are in the cab hailing space, the ride sharing space, hospitality space, professional on, and suddenly there is a huge demand that each of these platforms are taking some 2 lakh, 3 lakh gig workers and so on. So that's the kind of direction and flow of thought process that goes in the gig economy space. E-commerce aggregators have emerged and they're working with the government on benefits to cover the gig workers and so on. So broadly, if you ask me where this is, and this is something we need to draw the line, is that we do not have enough jobs. We will never be able to have that. And therefore, it is critical that different forms of earning potential comes up, different forms of work is available. And therefore, if you ask me, what should India be looking at to be truly self-reliant is it should be creating more work opportunities. Job opportunities are essential. I'm not denying the fact that we don't need jobs. We need jobs, but can we humanly create so many jobs that can give an employment to the kind of population that we are in? It is practically not possible. Therefore, more and more work opportunities need to be created. Fortunately, we are ahead of the curve in a sense that we have the youth of today who are also equally, instead of becoming job seekers, are becoming job creators, and they are creating more and more. Most of them, and I'm sure some of this crowd will also be having people who want to have their own startups and their own setups, and they will also become job creators. Some of them may be taking jobs, some of them may become even gig workers. And when I say gig workers, I'm not saying you would be doing something like a kind of a delivery kind of a thing or something like that, but in your own field that you are specialized in, you could do gig. You could offer your services both in India and outside India, and all of that powered by the internet, powered by the connected world that we live in, and powered by the knowledge that you would gather and you would professionalize upon. So therefore, overall, I think in summary, I would say that gig is going to be there. We can't be denying it, and we shouldn't be killing it. When I say we shouldn't be killing it, thoughts that move in the direction to say, okay, you guys have gig, now convert all of them into employees, again, is practically not possible, because economics of various models will not work. They beautifully work in the scenario that has been created where I earn and you earn and we all earn together, versus I pay you and let me figure out how to earn. Those kind of models actually choke the potential and promise that gig economy holds. And gig economy, India will be a unique model, should not be ideally compared with what developed and westernized countries do, primarily from a perspective of sheer numbers. As I said, we are talking about few thousands, probably a million, but we are here talking about tens of millions. And therefore, and we are talking about 2.5 crores every year, adding to the number of people who will grow on to become adults. So therefore, not the right way to probably do a judgment call. But I think what we need to harness is the potential of creating more work opportunities, creating those opportunities so that we remain civilized. An unemployed economy is a bad economy. It puts a lot of pressure on elements to go in a different thought process, situations going out of control. But an employed country, and a country which has enough work for everybody, is the one which is more civil and will truly grow on the path of success and be self-reliant. So gig economy not only creates Atmanirbharta for the person who is doing it, but also for us as a nation. So with that, I will conclude. I hope I'm within my time, but happy to take questions.
Thank you, sir. The knowledge and the corporate insight that the attendees of this session have got today cannot be simply put into words. The stage is now set up for Q&A round. I request the students to raise their hand and ask questions.
Do you think there is a difference between the generations that are adopting to the gig economy? Like the Generation Z are more of a freestyle. They believe in no strings attached. But the older generations believed from retiring from the same company and establishing a long-term relationship with the same company.
Well, absolutely. I think great question. Not only are we finding that people want to be free and exactly the terms that you used, this is a behavioral pattern that is now emerging across different strata of society. So it is not just, I would say, I mean, when I'm talking about people, and I made it clear in the beginning, I'm talking about the entire 2+ crore people who keep getting born every year and grow to become an adult. Now they are sitting in different strata of society. Today you go to the lowermost strata, again they are looking for work. They are not looking for a job. But there is a significant change thanks to internet and penetration. Everybody wants to have their freedom. They want to be mentally free. They don't want to be taking orders from a boss, whether it is a small-time job or a big-time job. So therefore, this generational shift is also, as I said, there are two things happening, as you said. One is, of course, the consumer of tomorrow is changing. I gave you that example. Many of them don't want to go into a market. They just want to search online and buy, which is great. I mean, behavioral shift gives scope to new economies and new companies and new opportunities. And that's what this has done. Because the consumer of tomorrow is changing and the consumer of tomorrow is now consumer of today, there is also a generational shift in the manner in which people are perceiving things. There's a generational shift in the manner in which people are looking at work and do not want to be stuck in a 9 to 5, which was earlier the so-called security model. Even if you were working in a toxic work environment, people were saddled onto it primarily because they had no other choice. But today, with this kind of a model, people are becoming more open to say that, okay, I might do gig, I might not do a 9 to 5 job, and sometimes gig folks are actually earning more. I came across various folks in Gurgaon, where I live, where there is somebody who smartly wakes up, youngster who smartly wakes up at early in the morning and switches over 4 different platforms during the day, depending on the peak load for each platform. So somebody is on, let's assume, a delivering thing in the morning for goods on e-commerce, afternoon goes into a food delivery platform which peaks for a lunch, and then goes on to a platform which is delivering goods from one home to another between houses, and then moves on to another platform which actually again delivers stuff, then is on to a bike taxi, and then gets on to the evening for the dinner delivery and earns more than a software developer. So people are having that flexibility, and then they decide and say that, okay, next 3 days I'm taking off. I'm not going to do on any of these platforms, and they are on their own terms and conditions. So this is something that is now permeating across different states of society, and therefore employers of tomorrow now have to be equally liberal and open-minded to accept these changes that are coming in terms of workforce of tomorrow. I hope that kind of answers.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
We are grateful that you took out the time to address the students of IIM Jammu, sir, and acquainted them with your words of wisdom. The session began with discussing on how gig is a slang which means informal form of work. Sir further emphasized on difference between the work and the job and how gig workers are looking for a work. And he concluded the session by saying how gig economy is here to stay. A heartfelt thanks to you, sir, for providing us with this opportunity. We look forward to hosting you on our campus soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Our next speaker will join shortly, so kindly wait, everyone.
Guys, please don't move out from classroom. Our next speaker will join next 2-3 minutes. Sir, it's 4:20.
पंजाब के मुख्यमंत्री चिरंजीव सिंह चन्नी साहब सुबह गुरुद्वारे मत्था टेकने गए और मंदिर में आए, बात करने के लिए हमारे साथ मौजूद।
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am. Am I audible to you?
Hi, good evening.
Ma'am, we can't see you. Your camera is not on.
Give me 1 second, please.
Sure.
अंदर ठीक है वो का कुछ कर रहा है इक्विपमेंट बना रहा है वो Hi,
Yes. Good evening, ma'am.
good evening. How are you?
We are good, ma'am. Thank you. How are you, ma'am?
Great, thanks.
So, can we start now?
Yes.
So, pursuing a career in sports is still frowned upon in certain parts of our country, especially for women. IIM Jammu is elated to welcome Ms. Deepika Kumari to the third volume of our flagship event, the Leadership Summit 3.0. The story of her struggle from a girl born to a financially struggling family in Ranchi to becoming the world's #1 and representing India to the world is legendary and inspiring.